regular meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council to order. You have an agenda that was distributed. We've got a couple of additional items for the agenda. One is the NSFM's prioritization of issues.
That's on the agenda.
Is part of the
Correspondence action.
resolutions, yeah. And we've got a couple of other things that we'll talk about as we go by. Okay, so in fact, we're dealing with an amended agenda. Have a motion to accept the agenda,
Make that motion, Mayor.
seconded by Councillor Now, all in favor. Motion's carried. Let's move on to the minutes of the regular meeting of October the 8th. What is your wish?
I move that they be accepted as circulated with a tiny typo correction that I've already discussed.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Bain. Seconded that they be accepted as presented, notwithstanding a typo correction by Councillor Carver. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the first real business item. Deputy Chief Mahone Bay and District Fire Department's quarterly report. Deputy Chief Adam Eakins, please.
No, I don't know why, but that screen's not working again, just in case you want to tell the IT people. That one's fine, this one's
It knows when the IT people are
out.
here
Yeah.
and when they're not. Please, sir.
Any questions on that? Did everyone get a look at it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looked like you were pretty busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were indeed.
May I have a question?
Yes, please,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Yes, okay.
I'm reading boiler explosion.
Yeah, well, so it's just a simple question, and I've probably asked it before, but it's the difference between fire alarms and fire and other calls. So it made me wonder if the fire alarms are like false alarms.
Mostly automated calls from like alarm systems and alarm panels. So if you got smoke detectors in your house that are wired into your alarm system that would go off that automatically call us. That's probably how we would classify that as opposed to a fire call that's being called in by someone.
Okay, so I have the impression then that the fire alarms may not necessarily mean it's a fire.
Yeah, they're mostly false alarms.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that was, okay.
But you responded to them.
Yeah,
we
you
have
went,
to.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And were any of these ones raised as an issue in terms of false alarms, or is it like totally new every time? These are just people who know better and made an honest
Without
mistake.
going through and looking at each individual call, I can't think there's any one that sticks out in my mind that's sort of repeat offender as such.
Because you guys know if somebody is calling you back over and over again for false alarms, that will
I mean,
will charge them for it. So
yeah, I mean, like if it's, the nursing home, for example, maybe we'd be down there a few times a year, but, that's, it's not like it's every day or every other day or something. That's when it sort of becomes a nuisance.
well, in a big place like the nursing home might have multiple reasons why a false alarm would have been
Yeah.
triggered. Yeah. Not like one business getting an after hours call to you guys every week at the same time.
Yeah, and sometimes I know we had an incident at RPS a few years back where they had a faulty detector or piece of equipment, but they couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. So it kept showing that was the fault, but they couldn't find out what piece it was. So we were down there quite often for that. But I think usually when most businesses find out what it is, they fix it. So.
And it's also with residences as well,
Yeah,
particularly
right.
seasonal residences that,
We get a few residential fire alarm calls, but it's usually people burning toast.
is there a fee for errant alarms that come from automated systems?
We don't. I think there's a bylaw in place that.
Yes.
Yeah,
if
we have the
sort of
ability
deem
to
it a
charge.
nuisance, then I think you guys can sort of fine them for it.
Yeah, but we
Well, I mean, I think as long as these guys haven't reached that point where they think that someone is
Frustration.
willfully fixing it, then
Malicious.
Or
Yeah.
ignoring a problem
Yeah.
with the system.
if you guys go out 3 times and you've told them and it seems like they're doing nothing about it, then
Okay.
do you want to tell us about the boiler explosion? How bad was it?
I actually personally wasn't too that cool, so
Okay.
I can't comment on it. But
A
Is
Sully's
that
boiler blew up.
An
basically.
industrial type thing?
No, well,
was it
it was a residential business type
Okay.
scenario. Wasn't bad. It was at
was
the-
it an instantaneous hot water heater?
Yeah.
That's what it was.
It was a hot water heater just blew, filled the place with smoke and steam and all that stuff. So
Man, there was one item, it's a bit of a gap, sort of tangentially related to the fire department, but during Hurricane Dorian, when we had the 165 centimeters or millimeters of rain, I think I understand that the fire department was quite busy with several instances of basement flooding, and I know I talked to you fine gentlemen a few times that evening. And I think the fire department prudently has a policy around there's only so much they can do in certain catastrophic situations based on the equipment that they have. Specifically, they're not in the business of pumping people out when the private sector can do that. And I think that for all the obvious reasons, you don't want volunteers being taken away from like real emergencies versus it's an emergency for the homeowner, but in the grand scheme of life, it's not an emergency. It would hold them. But I must say that if you were looking for a pump to pump out a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 feet of water in your basement in that situation, and you live in the town of Mahone Bay, those pumps are not available. Like everybody in the county was looking for a pump that night, and I do think that it's a gap between the fire department's mission critical pumping station versus like a small emergency pump that they could just give the homeowner for 3 or 4 hours, but keep in under the management of the fire department if required. If that kind of an appropriation came forward, I think there'd be a lot of merit for the fire department to evaluate if that's something that makes any sense to augment the pump, the pumps you have. They have huge pumps that will pump out the entire house in 5 minutes, but if you're just looking for a pump to pump out 2 feet of water over 4 or 5 hours, and trying to it's one thing to say if you try to phone a plumber like in the middle of a hurricane, like there aren't any plumbers that are going to come. So it was just something. The fire department's response is very impressive. It's just that might be something we want to add to the toolbox for next year.
Yeah, I don't know if Public Works has any of that type of pumps on hand either, but they're not super expensive. No, we had a half dozen of them in Shelburne because of the marine facility. That if your boat's going down, we'd rather give you a pump than have to bring your boat back up. So
I might just
And
add,
we've done that in Mahone Bay as well when a boat was
Yeah.
tied to the wharf and sinking.
Mhm.
The fire department went
Yeah.
down and pumped
And
it
with
out
2 or 3
to
feet we
prevent
can
an
pump, but-
environmental.
it's the calls that we get that are only 6 inches
Right.
Yeah.
that we can't touch.
Right.
Okay.
This pump,
Councilor O'Neill.
this pump that you're describing, and I think it's a great idea to add that capacity to the toolkit. Are they all the ones that are available? Are they all electric, or do they have their own on sort of generator? Or because I had that, it crossed my mind. Anybody who's sort of on the downward part of any hill. Kind of has that in mind that if there was a flood that you'd want your electricity on, and it would be, I wondered if any were gas powered.
You can get gas powered pumps as well as electric. I mean, from my mind, if you're just gonna give pumps to general homeowners, that might not be the best
Not
idea.
gas pumps.
I'd
Well,
like
we
to
had-
know what the liability issues are, and if I'm number 5 on the list, and you 4 get the pump first, and I have damage as a result. I mean, if we're gonna have 1 pump, should we have 30 pumps? I don't know.
I think you've got
That's part of the evaluation
We've
process.
got a lot of issues. Like we actually had one call for carbon monoxide poisoning during Dorian because somebody had their generator right next
In
to
the
their
house.
basement.
Really?
Yeah. So you've got that issue. And with gas powered pumps, kind of need to know what you're doing. You need to tend to them, make sure they're primed properly. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of damage to them.
Yeah, gas power could be tricky. And I was thinking mostly that you do it in kind of a rental arrangement way. So, like, in terms of the legalities of it, like, you're renting this person the pump. Because
That's
to Joe's
different.
point, if you could get one from the private sector in town, we wouldn't have a need for the service.
I use like 2-inch electric pumps for
Yeah.
my work, and I find if you were to do something like that, that would be the best solution because it's just plug it in and
Yeah, that's what
it
we're looking
runs,
at.
but you got to have your electric for it.
Okay. Since your last report, we had the training exercise on Claremont Street. I know it's mentioned in here. One of your members suffered a health problem during the exercise. Has he recovered?
Yeah, he had a
He was
bunch
out
of
the next
tests.
day having coffee with me at 6 o'clock in the morning.
He was out that night.
he just came out of the hospital.
Yeah, he was checked out, and everything's fine there. So.
Okay. Good.
It was very impressive that practice, that exercise, to see everybody at work and being coached from down below. It took me a while to realize that there was a coach there, coaching people on the ladder and coming out. That was interesting to see that whole process as a learning episode.
Did it meet the expectations of the fire department that
Yeah, I think for
That
the
planned
most
it?
part it did, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always things that can be improved upon, or things don't go quite to plan on the day, but that's just the same with anything.
There's some really nice photos of it out there too.
yes?
Brian,
Yeah.
Brian.
Took a lot of photos.
Which community on the South Shore is going to enjoy the Firefighter Prevention Week massive parade that we had last year?
This year,
Yeah, which town gets the big parade this
Oh.
year? Do you know?
it was in Bridgewater.
Oh, it's already
been.
been. Okay, in Bridgewater.
So the hydrants were used and worked properly from your perspective. No issues on that end.
Yeah, I think we didn't use a whole lot of water from my understanding, but
But if you needed to, you could have.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking for. Is that
Yeah,
like when you hooked up, the flow was there. You were able to actually use it. Because we don't use them enough to have a great sense. So I'm always happy.
We had hoped to use them Wednesday night when they were doing the flushing, but we sort of got a deluge of wet weather.
It was a nice night.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor
I
Carter.
have two things. One is I want to say how impressed I was with how quickly the fire department arrived to the corner near my house where a tree was down on a wire. I mean, it was really fast. I'm sure it wasn't more than 5 minutes. It was really quite amazing. And they told me to get away. Don't come off your porch. But I'm curious about the smoke in the church. Was there ever a source decided?
we never found a source or for that, so it was kind of a bit of a mystery.
Sort of feel it came from outside and got into the church somehow from another source, and because you couldn't see it, but you could smell it when you were inside the church. A lot of resources to try to find it.
Councillor Bain?
I went to the open house and had a hamburger and won a smoke detector.
There
Nice.
you go.
Look at
There you
that.
go.
Here's some breaking news, Kevin.
Breaking news. That's like CNN. Breaking news.
Were you allowed to win?
He had a mask on, nobody knew who was saying that.
Maybe I was the only one there.
Okay, any other questions for the deputy chief?
There's one thing I would like to bring up, and that's civic numbers in the town.
Yes.
Like we had several calls on Dorian where they haven't got the approved civic number by the house, and it makes it awfully difficult to find anyone. I've had a couple of other calls with businesses on Main Street where like they don't have a civic number posted, and you can ask them to post one, and as far as I'm aware, a lot of the people I've been asking haven't been posting their civic numbers.
Maybe the
I
mayor
tried.
put that in his newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried to mention it
Social
to
media.
someone who hasn't got a civic number when we do find someone. I know one lady up the road here, she actually renamed the lane and actually had civic numbers put up at the bottom end on the buildings as well, so
Mhm.
that was probably had some help from you guys, so we appreciate
Well, and if you
that.
ever have any where you've noticed it and then you see they're not complying with it,
Yeah.
let us know. We can go.
Yeah, I don't. Is there a bylaw in town?
Yes, yeah, you are required to post them.
Can our,
I mean, I don't think we've ever fined anyone under it, but hopefully people will understand the need.
can our bylaw officer have input in that, visiting them?
If we had a name, we could quite possibly, Al could go see if he could talk to
Yeah.
them.
You could just drive around it and see where there's no civic number.
Well, yeah, although we could never guarantee probably that we get them all now, and so it is good for people to report them.
Yeah.
That's in a lot of it.
Good thing to follow up on.
So maybe that's something we can liaise with you guys on, and
Absolutely. I've made a note for the, for communications and to speak with,
Yeah.
to look at policies, to speak with the bylaw officer.
Good idea.
Because we have cooperated with the bylaw officer on some of the illegal burn ones that we had.
Mhm.
He's actually gone and he's communicated back with me the results of him going to the residents and stuff.
Oh, good.
All right.
You're accused that it won't happen again.
Anything else? As always, Deputy Chief, we do appreciate the fact that you and your members are there, and please pass along our thanks to them. All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thanks,
There.
Okay, correspondence items 4.1, Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities resolutions report to the membership and the final resolutions report. Comments,
If
please.
if I may, I just want to make a comment about one of the statements that was made,
Mhm.
where, I don't have it up, but it said to the effect that, virtually everybody around the province had supported the 5 top resolutions that were listed. The fifth one on the list is municipal modernization. And at the session that the mayor and I attended in Truro, it was clear that the majority of the people in the room specifically were saying, knock that one off and put another one in the top 5. So, you know, it has some clout. The people were really saying they didn't think that the municipal modernization one was anyone that needed to have the weight of the organization behind it right now. We sort of had a brief exchange and agreed that,
Absolutely
yeah.
agree. I am quite shocked that after having had the sessions, in particular the one that we were at,
Mhm.
that they hold to that argument. There was discussion in Truro about what does municipal modernization really mean. I think it hit the agenda when the whole notion of amalgamations had come out, been addressed, and was starting to die away. There was a session at the Weston Hotel that was organized by the province, by Municipal Affairs, and there was a well-known facilitator doing the session, and basically facilitated the group into the package that the province had brought in the door with them, which was municipal modernization. And that topic has held on. And now people are saying it's not within the top 5. There are things that are more important. We are making some progress in how we do our business with respect to our neighbors. What does it really mean? But it still stays on the list as number 5.
Yeah, we put it on there when Mom Burkett wanted us to. They shuffled it out. They haven't mentioned it since he left the position,
Right.
and it's still on there.
Yeah, so it's now phrased as, ask the province to continue to work with municipalities to develop and support municipalities willing to work together. Well,
Do we have to tell them that?
goodness me. But during that session in Truro, when people around the room, one after another, were saying, that one doesn't have enough meat, and they said, the the point is, we have to stick with the same 5 or we lose credibility. That was their answer.
Year after year
Yeah.
after year.
We have to stick with the same 5 or we lose credibility. It didn't make sense
Yeah.
to me.
And before the argument was if we left the same things up there and we weren't making any headway, we lost credibility.
So, I don't know if there's anything we want to do about it, other than
Too late for this year.
whinge and whine.
Well, we, Councillor Carver and I had discussed the opportunity of writing a joint letter to Wayne Mason, who is the president of NSFM, expressing the concerns around the continuing inclusion and misrepresentation of municipal modernization, particularly after our Truro exercise. And we, Councillor Carver and I, felt it may be something that council may wish to endorse, commenting to NSFM on the fact that there are other issues that may be of greater import than municipal modernization.
My instinct was to write a letter myself, and then I asked, because the
And I
mayor
asked
was,
him.
because the mayor was there, I said, do you want to, should we write it together? But the idea of doing it as a council is kind of interesting too. I could make a motion.
I think it would be more, it
Impactful.
may get more attention, but did you have a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion that this council support, the council, communicate to at SFM their wish for the municipal modernization item to be dropped off the top 5 and discussion about the next highest priority to be moved up into the top 5.
We have a motion, do we have a seconder? Moved and seconded? Discussion?
The
Councilor
only
Ray?
comment I could make that if it's gonna stay the same every year, the resolutions, first of all, it means nothing is being accomplished. And second of all, we're not allowing for any evolution to take place on the needs or changes to attitudes and that sort of thing. So it makes good sense that I would support this.
I think one of the contributors to this is the change in the resolutions process. Once upon a time, we would, here around this table, embrace an issue that would go to NSFM as a resolution. Somebody would stand up and, chair recognizes, and then the entire group would vote on it. But now you've got the caucuses, they do it individually, the rurals, the towns, the HRM and CBU, or no, CBRM, right? But eventually it shuffles into the executive of NSFM, and that's where the 5 get sifted out. So, anyway, okay. Any other question? On the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you.
Thank you.
And if I could suggest, we could CC that to the other mayors of Lunenburg County?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So who is going to NSFM?
me, Councillor Bain's going, Deputy Mayor's
a lot of
going,
us. Oh, okay.
Councillor O'Neill's going,
Mhm.
good.
Great.
Are the issues to be monitored, and are they a different category, or are they just lower priorities?
They are lower than the 5, but deemed to be a common issue across the municipalities.
They didn't make it into the top 5.
Yeah, they didn't make the top 5.
Those are the ones they're asking us to consider, right? Because they said they
Well,
keep
we
top
would
five
be
the same.
considering one of those to move up
Mm.
if we were to
Yeah.
replace municipal modernization.
And so you guys did some ranking, I think, right?
We did.
Although I believe, Maureen, you probably read over this a few times, try to figure it out too, but it seems like the actual opportunity to express these priorities is still individual. Because you'll be at Towns Caucus, right?
At the
voting?
caucus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still one member, one vote for whoever's
Yeah,
there.
exactly, yeah.
So we can talk about it to kind of make sure we all know where everybody else came down, but
Well, these issues are gonna be brought up at town caucus meetings, so there's
Yeah.
format there to do it, so.
I've never seen them change. as a
It probably
result
won't
of town
change, and won't
caucus
change this
meetings,
year,
so
we just start the ball for another year, your
Yeah.
worship.
And they are recommending that the one that's at the next top of the list be moved up as soon as any one of the top 5 are resolved, then the top of the next list.
Yeah. And
So
what
by
we're,
design, does that mean item 6 moves up?
I believe so.
yeah.
Wow.
So if
And-
modernization came off, then whatever's at the top of these ones would go up.
Yeah.
So if we have a feeling as to which one should be at the top, then I think council does have some feelings as a group.
these are what they call the statements of concern.
Mm.
Right? And we based on the survey that the clerk has done, we have municipal responsibilities. I'm not sure how that relates to municipal modernization, and sustainability and infrastructure funding. That's where the tie is.
It must be an interesting consolidation of information, because it's just so surprising that items 6 through 12 are higher on the list than, say, item doctor recruitment or housing, which are topics that seem much more topical for our council than some of the items a little higher on the list. So it must be interesting how the list changes depending on where you are in the province.
Well, surplus schools is a good example, right?
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it's a real problem.
Mm.
Trying to deal with the schools and the sites once the building is gone. That's what they do. Municipal responsibilities, sustainability, and infrastructure funding were tied for number 1 for our council. Number 2 was climate change. Number 3 is policing. Number 4 is cannabis. And number 5 was the surplus schools. Which
In our group,
this is
in
the
our
survey that the clerk,
in
You
our
were-
council.
you were given the 6 to rate. Now,
Mm-hmm.
should a low-cost housing be in there instead of surplus schools? Right?
Well, and it's in part too how you define these, which is always up to the executive really to put the actual ask on. Because I mean, cannabis is meant to be, we follow the FCM's request that the province give us half of the cannabis revenues. And then it becomes a bunch of talk about what might be going on with cannabis. But the ask was give us half of your revenues, and that's the only part of it that NSFM should really be focused on.
So
The ask is live up to your commitment that you gave us.
That was firmly from the start,
Yeah.
get half the money.
Yeah, well, that's what the Fed said they should do anyway. I
Yeah.
don't know if our premier ever said he would, but.
Infrastructure funding, the province is supposed to give us enough because we're a town of less than 5,000 people
Well,
to get us to 93% funding.
and this is that ties into the item that's called municipal responsibilities. It has to do with the amount of the variety of responsibilities that the municipalities
Yeah.
have, responsibilities that they have to pay for. And it refers to property tax as a primary source of taxation. Since then, the responsibilities of municipalities have grown, some through downloading and others through
Yeah.
willingness to better serve citizens. So it goes on, municipalities have the ability to address infrastructure needs most often on towns versus rural lines. Towns provide more services, so it's a town-rural divide again.
So that will be discussed again at the caucuses, the night of the 4th, I think.
Yeah, I don't know, are we
And
going
then
to,
I suspect on the last afternoon, the Thursday
Yeah.
the
afternoon,
vote will be,
they'll discuss them again and they'll do a vote on them.
I think the caucuses are the afternoon of the 5th.
On the 5th, yes.
That's what it says here.
Okay. Anything further on that one?
Six.
It's not specific to the document itself, but as we assessed who would be there, I thought it would be interesting if we knew in advance who was going to be at which of the sessions, the discretionary sessions, to make sure that there's some good coverage.
Yeah.
And And then the other thing that I thought would be very interesting, and it was a challenge to myself that I didn't actually follow up on the last time that I went to the NSFM. I thought it would be interesting to make a presentation at council for the benefit of everyone, so that we can all know what happened. And normally, I know the mayor, in particular, has brought summaries into it. And I just wanted to just say, you know, I think that would be very positive for anyone who's attending the conference to plan to do that in advance.
We've done that.
Yeah.
I've sent written summaries.
Yeah, and
Boring people.
yes,
And I was gonna say, because of the amount of, because of the volume of discussions and that take place over 4 days, that to try and summarize in a paragraph what I heard in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the value is, but if we all went to that with the intention of gathering information and bringing it back, hard copies of information or booklets or brochures or presentation notes, all of the PowerPoints are usually made available within 2 or 3 days of the session on the NSFM website, then we can plan to share that information. We would need probably a 3-hour council meeting. If
Yeah.
4 or 5 people attending
Yeah.
were to do a heated discussion on it. But you're right, we should look at the agenda and kind of think about who might want to go to what session.
It looks like there might only be the one concurrent session section. Just this one up here.
We have 2 council meetings in November.
Yeah.
It's hard to squeeze, to your point. It would be nice to have enough allocated time at one of those 2 meetings to have a bit of a debrief.
Especially
it's just-
if you limit it to key point issues.
It's just, you know, I know we've got a heavy agenda in November from the sounds of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your worship, we could always make a combined document at the office. If people wanted to do something, as Councillor Carver said,
Okay.
we could always make a combined document and share it. To your point about heavy agendas, but still having the opportunity to share.
It's there if someone
Yeah.
chooses to refer to it.
Looking at those 3
I mean,
concurrent
it's a
sessions, I think we'll be at different ones anyway, so we should have.
the,
Political administration dichotomy.
the program's significant. I mean, the town makes a significant investment to have participation, and it's worthwhile to allocate an appropriate amount of time to reflect that investment.
That
You
investment
know,
we have.
even if we were able to even have like a special meeting that would be half an hour before one of the 2 council meetings in November, where that allocated time might just be for that purpose, that might be appropriate too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing issue, and I've chatted about this with the CAO. When I go to conferences or workshops and I have information or ideas that I think are useful, there isn't a
Forum.
an easy forum for people to talk about them or think about them, and sort of wondered about the idea of periodically having a 2-hour session just to sort of do
Ooh.
feedback, that kind of
Good
thing.
idea.
But it would have to
Do
be
you wanna,
as
do
our
you wanna
schedules
put
get
that
busier.
on, like the next council agenda for discussion though,
Sure.
the concept?
Yeah.
Like, as Councillor Carver, I don't know what you wanna call it, regular discussion period.
Yeah, let's call it that for now.
If you come up with something better before we put the
Yeah,
agenda, we
yeah.
can change it.
Okay. So we have the issue of prioritization. We also have the leaders' lunch, which is taking place on the Friday afternoon, the last day of the NSFN conference. Starts at noontime. Is 1313 Hollow Street, is that the Weston?
Yeah, stay for
Yeah,
that,
that-
you'll be able to be there
No,
for
it
the
says
prize
it's
draw.
from the-
Walk from
From the
there.
west.
Fill up
Okay.
the ballot.
I always don't do it either.
The mayor of Hillsborough Hills, North Carolina, and Brown, councillor from Bradley Beach in New Jersey, that are both notable elected officials involved with the offshore issues campaign will be the guests at the leaders' lunch. And I'm under the impression that on the Tuesday, the opening day of NSFM, there's to be a press conference at the Westin done by the offshore drilling group, and it will set the tone for them for the time when they're there. They're supposed to be in Mahone Bay the evening of Wednesday when the conference is on. Unfortunately, they're inviting elected officials to that as well, but most of the elected officials in Lunenburg County are going to be at the Westin for the NSFM workshop. So the leaders' lunch, Friday, the day NSF ends, and you're supposed to go to the website and click on the little blue RSVP, and they'll have your name. They'll throw another cup of water in the soup. So, okay.
So you're going to the website of the Offshore Alliance? Whose website are we going to?
I'll send you the email.
Yes.
Okay. That's got the links right
Thank
in.
you. Live links.
Yeah. Okay. What, do you have the same email, I take it?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now.
Yeah, okay, she's gonna send it. Remembrance Day, of course, November 11th. Legion Branch 49 has advised us they're gonna start again this year with the church service as opposed to the other way around. St. John's Lutheran at 9 a.m. The parade will form at the Legion at 10:30, march to the cenotaph, and the ceremony will be, as always, at 11 a.m. Luncheon to follow at the Legion Hall, open for the community. We normally do have a good representation from council at that event.
I never knew whether everybody was welcome for the lunch at the Legion. or whether-
Yeah, everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
How many sandwiches can you eat with the little cheese filler?
Cherry cheese.
There you go. The Heritage Advisory Committee. Ta-da. Centennial Celebration event taught by Deborah Trask, who is the heritage researcher that is part of the committee.
And curator emeritus of the Nova Scotia Museum.
There you go. There will be a ceremony to recognize the biscuit eater as having been identified as a registered heritage property. The plaque will be unveiled at 11:30. Deborah Trask's presentation begins at 10 o'clock. So 10 o'clock presentation, 11:30 the unveiling of the plaque.
Yeah, that.
Saturday,
This is
day after tomorrow. Okay?
Yeah, it's a history day.
Yeah, the museum's on at 1:30, talking about World War I and the impacts on the town. Again, that's another thing, you're supposed to email the museum and let them know that you're planning to attend, because seating is limited. Okay? All right. There's all kinds of things to do. Let's go. Correspondence for information items.
Motion received and file, your worship.
Do we have a
5-1 to
seconder?
5-9.
Seconded by Councillor Now.
Your
On
worship.
on the question, yes?
I have circles around 4 items, which means I have questions about them. Update on the CAP Waymason's letter, update on the CAP.
Mm-hmm.
And the note I wrote here was whether or not his information would lead to the possibility of a resolution by council. And around a message to the member of our MLA. there was an action.
Good point. So basically, it would be a letter on a town letterhead piece that says that the Mahone Bay Town Council supports.
If we do, if we make the motion to
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Mayor, on that point, so this item is going to be at the conference in early November.
Yep.
And
There'll be some kind of
there'll
an
be
update.
and there'll be a comprehensive conversation, I suppose, on the topic.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, so it's our number one agenda, I believe. It's number one item. Do we think that there's going to be some kind of a ratified resolution that's going to come out of the Union of Municipalities out of that event?
I don't think it's gonna come out of that event. What the NSFM, it has to be an all-party committee decision to remove the cap, and I think it's a 2/3 majority
Oh, yes,
of an all-party committee
You mean in
that's,
the provincial-
that's required,
the
yes.
provincial
And
legislation. Yes, fair enough.
NSFM is leaning on them
They certainly
to
are.
do just that.
I know personally I support the elimination of the cap, and I'd certainly support a motion of council to that effect, but I'm just wondering if it might behoove us to wait. Does it make sense to do that at this council meeting, or put it on the agenda for the meeting after that gets discussed in a more province-wide view? I know other communities have different perspectives on the topic, but just wondering if we might get some more information out of that discussion.
The elected officials with waterfront property, I think, are the ones who are opposed to the elimination.
Yeah.
But Councillor Carver again, and I happened to attend a session at the NSFM in Truro last year, the spring workshop. There was a presentation on the cap. And they had a representative from the Nova Scotia Real Estate Board and the overwhelming, I think, reaction and follow-on support, and it's still being indicated by NSFM executive and the members, is the elimination of the cap.
Yeah.
Councillor Bain?
Grant Thornton did a fairly comprehensive study
Yeah.
of that and gave various options.
Councillor O'Neill?
I think I'm curious about the options around it and not so much whether to or not to. I assume that there's been some discussion about methodology
Yeah.
and time frame. I'd be very interested if there was additional information
Okay.
about what's being thought about. I think
Working period.
Yeah.
and all that.
I'm more cautious in the idea that the NSFM executive is just going to fill in all those details through the MOU they're negotiating. When in reality, some of those details may be something that the membership of the NSFM differ about. I like the pilot approach because I thought it would give us an opportunity to explore some of that, but they've given up on the pilot approach now. They're trying to do a wholesale removal across the whole province at one time.
Right away?
Well, except that they've received, this letter from Way Mason suggests differently from that they have,
Slow phase out.
looking at the slow phase out, yeah. Or the-
13 years.
Yeah. So I didn't mean instantly. I meant not in one area before in a different area.
But
No, let's wait till we go through the conference.
Mm.
And then we can write our letter.
I think every council will have to weigh in, be on the record on where they stand on the cap eventually. I just don't know if it's in October being on the record or November.
And
Okay.
they also talk about revenue neutrality, where the municipalities would reduce their tax rates or change their tax rates.
Which is an incredibly regressive thing to do in this climate. Be
yeah.
cutting your tax rate,
Yeah.
your general tax rate, not targeted support for people on income assistance or anything.
Okay. Maybe
Okay,
we do need to wait.
yeah, okay, so then 5.5, the issue of short-term rental accommodations. I was struck by the amount of information that was there and the amount of activity that's been going on around the province and around the country. And again, I wondered whether there's some merit in considering councils communicating with the MLA to support the community letter that had been included in the package.
This community letter or the
Yeah.
one from Mayor Bailey in Lunenburg?
Well,
further on
both,
down?
both,
Okay.
both. I mean, in some combined way.
Mayor Bailey's letter was amazing. It was excellent.
Yeah.
It was,
Well, and that's why it's on the agenda.
yeah.
Hopefully, council would undertake a motion to echo the sentiments of Mayor Bailey to the minister.
Is it on the agenda, separate from the correspondence? Mayor Bailey's letter?
Yes, it is.
Where?
Rachel's letter?
Surprised that's not on the
No,
agenda.
it's in the information items.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the information.
Yeah, it doesn't come up with the rurals. They're not.
So,
When
I-
we come with the
I would
rules,
like
they don't-
to
they won't get it
put
done.
forward
Here
the
it is,
idea
yes.
of writing a letter to the MLA or to support Mayor Bailey's letter and or the community letter that's been included in 5.5.
To the minister and to the MLA.
Rachel's went to Minister of Municipal Affairs and Minister of Business.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have a well thought out motion, or I'm just putting it out there in my garbled way.
We received we had a presentation from the province. They came down, sat at the end of the table and spoke about this topic at length. And I think that Mayor Bailey's letter really cuts to the immediate, challenge that we have a policy in place that has logic gaps. To be frank, I mean, it just doesn't cogently stitch together with, fairness across other business owners. And in Lunenburg, you could see how it would be extremely challenging to have that conversation with when they have so many ins in the community as well, even more than we would.
Interesting to look at the composition of the working group whose discussions resulted in this short-term rental policy, wherein I think there was one elected official and any number of persons from the tourism business, frankly, in the group. Appears to be a rather one-sided
Yeah.
discussion.
So could we do something with piggyback on Mayor Bailey's letter?
Write a letter
Would
of
be a-
support.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would it be appropriate to write to the same people and say, we support
Absolutely,
Mayor Bailey's
Yeah.
letter?
Mayor, when's your next warden and mayor's meeting?
I don't think we have one on the agenda, have we? I haven't
It's
seen.
November 20th here.
Yeah, that's should be. should be.
Late November here.
Might be this may be a good topic to have a one letter from all of the municipal units in the area to have strength in numbers. If you thought that you could get everyone to agree on a position, and maybe we can't.
I would prefer to, personally, would think we would strike while the iron is hot, and Mayor Bailey's letter is on the minister's desk. Notwithstanding that, to put it on the agenda for discussion at the mayor's deputy CAO.
So would it be appropriate to make a motion that we write to these same folks as Mayor
Certainly
Bailey and
would.
support her letter?
Right after we vote on the motion that's on the floor to file as correspondence.
Okay.
Do that after.
Yes.
You can keep going
okay.
through
No,
your
no,
items,
This
but
came
that's-
about
so-
as a result of
keep
the
going down my
discussion
list.
on the motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
my next one was Mayor Bailey's letter, and then my last one was 5.8 Gary Langell, the tree donation program, and it simply, I assume it will send a letter of thanks to the Lions Club.
And a whole bunch of stakes.
Yeah.
And it good, okay,
And
yeah,
pins and-
great, okay. But a formal letter as well as the stakes will go with our
Maureen, is that?
That's
Can you
fine,
just-
yeah.
letterheaded mayor and all that.
Yeah.
Well, does the mayor have his own letterhead still?
No,
No, but
no.
town letter. Town
I know,
letter.
someplace they have an
Okay.
office of the mayor letter.
I keep looking at Lunenburg's World Heritage Site and say, geez, no.
Well, we could just write that on ours, we'll see if anyone
We're just gonna make a motion.
Good idea. Okay, is that it, Councillor Carver?
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything in the way of commentary on the motion to receive and file the information correspondence? All in favor? Motion's carried. Before we leave that, I would note that the Lions Club's 50th anniversary is going to be celebrated on November the 20th? It's or the 16th.
Don't have it in here.
So,
Okay. So I think sometime between
Yeah.
now and then, council would send a congratulatory letter to the Mahone Bay for an area
right.
Lions Club.
And we did take out a big ad in their program congratulating them on
Yes,
this.
yeah.
So
Councillor
Richard, now
Carver?
is the time if you want
Yes,
to,
so,
whoever's gonna make that motion.
Hang on,
Councillor
folks.
Now was gonna make a motion, I have a text over here.
Okay, you got it all set up, go for it.
I move the council send a letter to the Minister of Housing and the Minister of Municipal Affairs. Are they both, they're not both the same, are they?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
they are.
Housing and
Okay.
Municipal
And
Affairs.
and the Minister of Business, as well as to the MLA, supporting the letter from Mayor Bailey, raising concerns about provincial regulation of short-term accommodations in Nova Scotia.
On a second.
Seconded by Councillor Now. On the motion. Motion's carried. Okay. Let's go to staff reports.
So the first one's the regular
biggie.
council report. I don't know why it's slightly out of order here with the operating initiatives slide before the intro, but doesn't really matter. All the info is still there. So if anyone has any questions, let me know and I'll figure out where they are. And if we don't have any questions,
Wait,
that's
wait,
great.
You don't think you're getting off that easy.
Sorry, am I the only person who ever has questions?
No.
Why is this?
We always count on you to.
All right, staff report, under operating initiatives, number 10, grow the load, what does that mean? I mean, and promotion, the idea of promotion.
Yeah.
What was that?
So that's under the electrical utility, and grow the load initiatives are those initiatives that are intended to bring additional electrical demand to the utility, mostly via the conversion away from fossil fuels. So that would be like initiatives to provide a heat pump rental, to encourage people to move away from oil heat at home, or electric vehicle charger incentive, that type of thing.
So that's the promoting the idea.
Yes, which
Okay.
we've hired ThinkWell to do
Right.
through
Okay.
area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Capital, number 5. New sewer hookup, where was that?
Oh, unless it's noted under Derek's, which they often are, I would have to
Capital, new sewer
check out.
services, new hookup to date.
That's
There
just
was a
one
water
to
too,
this
yeah.
year to date, so I think that was
Just a new build or
Still went
something,
up.
is that?
did a big dig up here, but I don't know if it was new or that
There
was
was a
replacement
sewer
line.
replacement done on, Maple Street. Replacement done.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. Yeah, this would be an actual new one, but I mean, it's one of these buildings. That's been,
The only new development that I know is on Long Hill Road, they haven't started that yet.
and this would just be since April.
Oh, since April, oh, heavens.
could have been
Yeah.
at the beginning of.
All right, so it's probably a new build. I think my first reaction was, oh, was there a hookup in the straight pipe area?
Oh
But
no,
that
I
wouldn't be
no,
happening yet,
no.
no.
This was just a bit of new build where there was
Yeah.
existing pipe, and for $1,000, it's not even a very difficult one, honestly.
Okay, then in the staff report, number 6, the Pro Kids request at Modal. Why did they ask for a revised proposal? What was
Maureen,
their
do you
issue?
want to speak to that?
It has, it's gone back and forth a fair amount. There are two main issues. One is the amount of money that is available to be distributed as part of this. And the other issue is the council request was that they help us administer that. So one of the first things that's gone back and forth is what would the amount of money be for us to contribute to that administrative function? So one of the things they've been looking at right now, a percentage. So if say if a person distributes $500, how long is that going to take? How many applications do they think that is? Therefore, that's about that much time. So if they're looking at that percentage as to what is an accurate reflection of the time that would be used. And then the other, I think that's where they are right
So we
now.
might
That's the
give them,
biggest.
say, just for example, we gave them $500 and they took $50 out of it for administration, then the amount left over for grants would be $450. And then I think the other thing is, we're kind of trying to figure out, because the Pro Kids funding doesn't just come from the municipal level, how do we get our share to leverage properly the money coming from United Way and from the province, and donations, and including donations from people in town that maybe have donated through Modal before.
Yeah, it is, and at this point, I believe there's still that structure piece is the first piece, but then yes, there will be that other issue of dollars.
But the will is there. It's just finding the way. Is that?
That's my understanding. It seems to be something that they feel would. I get the sense that the will is there, but it's not done yet.
They're not against it.
Yes.
That might be the.
Yeah.
Councillor Neal?
To confirm though, children and families who are current residents in Mahone Bay who need Pro Kids assistance, they're currently eligible for that funding.
The distinction right now is we're not promoting it as something that people can access. Like, our understanding is if Montmedial gets a request from a kid in town, they would either traditionally deal with it if they could, or now at least bring it to our attention for the monies that we've. I don't think they just ignore it. But we're not promoting it. We're not telling anyone that they could access it because we don't have an agreement.
Yeah, we don't have that structure in place.
I don't think someone would go to them today and that they would just ignore it and wouldn't even tell us about it or do anything with it. But there's no guarantees of that.
Because they're not through that end yet. So.
Councillor Neal?
Under the capital item 4, the SCBA packs, we got turned down for that. The government has now increased the amounts, and the Premier made the statement that no qualifying project would be refused.
Did they announce a new window or anything?
And that's, I don't know about the window, but I know they announced more funds.
Okay.
The Premier had said that none of the qualifying grants would be refused. At this time, so I wonder if we should look into that.
Yeah, we definitely should.
$20,000 we might be able to access.
I think we'll go back at it as soon as we possibly can, so thank you.
Councillor Bain, did you have a comment?
Mayor, on
Councillor
item 8, with regard to the agreement with Mahone Bay Center to manage the soccer field, maybe it's just the wording. I know we have received a letter several months ago, and it was being under evaluation by the staff, but I think the way I take this is that we're actually proceeding with some kind of an arrangement and we're going to review the draft agreement next month. Is that how we should take that, or it's still under evaluation?
Well, I met with the society, and their suggestion was that we don't try to lease or anything. We just try to come up with an MOU for cooperation for 2021, and then get it to a point where council can take a look at it, their board can take a look at it. Because right now, when we talk about cooperation, we haven't really defined what that might look like. So it's more about a 2-page MOU that defines the terms of that cooperation. I don't think that either side is actually especially comfortable with the idea of something more formal like a lease at this point. I wouldn't recommend one right now, but I think that the main thing right now would be for them to possibly take on booking through their automated booking system. So that's what they'd like to offer us, and essentially, how do we value that?
Okay.
Because
Thank
if
you.
I understood the initial request, they wanted to operate the field and handle the bookings, but any fees that would be collected would go to them.
Well, that's what we're trying to work out in terms of I don't think they particularly want to derive revenue from it, but they see the provision of the bookings as a service, and so therefore need some way of feeling compensated. So
I don't necessarily agree with any fees that are charged, or even charging fees, especially if some of these very young youth groups that are using the field, presently, that type of thing.
Well, I watched the field very carefully this summer. Sunday nights from 5 till 7, there was typically 8 adults and 10 kids
Mhm.
who kicked the soccer ball around, they're doing skill building.
Oh,
okay?
yeah, they also.
That's it. 7 out of 10 weekends this summer they did that.
Yeah.
I personally did not see the field used other than that all summer.
Neither did I, and I was actually over talking to the group that uses it on Sunday night, they're the one night.
Yeah,
And, they seem to be doing a great job with the kids, but it's one night out of a week, say 7 nights out of a summer, so.
I wanted to congratulate at a certain point the Sweet Ride for running the cyclocross event. And that was a 2-day event that fully incorporated all of the recreational space in Mahone Bay and connected the soccer field with the baseball field and the children's playground.
Mhm.
And that is a twice annual event that will be sponsoring Mahone Bay. Brought in 72 riders and their families, and it was beautifully
Yep.
sunny and successful. And that seems to me a really lovely illustration of how the soccer field will, could, if it was properly managed, continue to be used.
But somebody with a automated calendar sitting at their desk can type it in when those 2 days are booked. I don't see giving the soccer field away.
No.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to what comes out of this discussion with the Mahone Bay Center.
One question on the bike thing this week, I think it was a great thing, but there were streets closed. I'm just wondering how that related with the town, if they had permission from the town to close those streets?
Yeah, we did coordinate with them. We were just talking about like on Pond or where. Yeah. So we did coordinate that with Rosemary's usually to us a couple months ahead for those things. So.
I'm just thinking, would it not be appropriate to advise emergency services of those closures? We never received anything. I'm sure EHS never received anything.
I mean, I think the closure was only for an hour or two, right?
It was for a couple hours, but
Yeah.
even so, if something happened in those areas,
No, it
that
wouldn't be bad.
nice if the emergency services were advised of it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, and I think it's one of those, like, we were just talking this morning about trying to have a streamlined street activity system so that if a festival doesn't have any vending or anything like Rosemary's, but it does have that, we would have like a checkbox of like notify emergency service
Because
provider.
it was up Pond Street and then School Street from just down below where it comes up there. That was closed going up the other way too. So just that if emergency services knew, they could better plan their response.
No, that's good note.
Anything else from the report?
Oh, I just
Councillor Kerber?
had one other thing, and it was under the CAO's report, and it was around having hired the new Remo coordinator. Who,
Yeah.
did I say this last time we met at a? Well, she came to a group meeting that I was involved with last week, and as part of the discussion, one of the things that came up was the idea of tailoring current little threefold pamphlet so that it's more local, so that it would identify places that specifically in the Mahone Bay town or area where resources might be. So it was an idea that was put out. She seemed to think it was a good idea, and just sort of letting you know that it may come back at some point. That idea.
I'm not familiar with the pamphlet that you're referring
It's a shelter-in-place brochure.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
okay.
was-
72 hour.
to. Yeah. The
Well,
72
there
hour
was a
program.
72-hour one that was produced federally, but that they stopped producing it in paper. So locally, Remo produced a shelter-in-place brochure.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, we just ran out downstairs and we have a PDF and we can just print more. And we always include them with new
Yeah.
new resident packages and that sort of thing.
That's good.
Item number 6, the town website update. What's the current status of that? I see the contract has been awarded. Is there nothing beyond that? Or?
So right now we're in the information gathering, so all of the town committees and all of the town staff are being given a little survey to,
Okay.
in consideration of the town committee's mandate, consider what the website's current service is, whether it could be improved. So for economic development, age friendliness, police, so think about what the website does in terms of that service, what resources could be on there. And staff have also been asked and we'll give a lot of feedback. And then at the end of November, when all the feedback has been supplied over to the contractors, they're going to be working on a draft and hopefully show.
And council will see a beta version
Yes,
of the website?
absolutely. I don't think we'll get to a beta version before Christmas, but we can give you more specific timelines pretty soon.
And at what point will there be a discussion with council about what is proposed to be included? You mentioned economic development. At what point would we discuss what's going to be included on the website for that or any other topic for that matter?
I think my thought would be, Mo, that when we summarize all the different responses that we get in, we'll do a report to council where we say, this is what we heard and these are the things that we think that need to be priorities for this new website. And then if council has any opinion on that, and then from there, we'll go to an actual beta version that you can look at.
And this is a town of Mahone Bay, this building's website.
The town
governance of the
corporation's
town.
website.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to be particularly focused for service delivery. There's no tourism angle. The chamber does that.
But when we talk about things like real estate, would there be anything beyond, if there even was, a link from the town's website to the chamber's website around the real estate, or?
The big question on real estate will be the status of the community or the Lunenburg County land asset program, or however we want to call it. So every CED meeting for a while, and on Mo's section of the staff reports here, I think it's in there probably. Certainly in CED, we've been updating on the town is meeting with MODL, MODC, and the town of Bridgewater regularly, trying to create a county-wide web service that you can use if you're looking for properties that are available to streamline that process. So Mo can also speak to it, but the idea is you'd be able to filter the search so that if you wanted to look for only properties that were zoned commercial and had access to town water and sewer in Lunenburg County, you choose those things and it would pop up the properties in towns that fit that description. So that's the thought. I don't know, Mo, you've actually been heading this project. Do you want to say anything?
One thing actually to add to that is Lunenburg has been participating mostly by email. But
I'm
they've
sorry.
just
They're officially
yeah.
still on board.
They've actually I don't think you even know this yet, Dylan. They've just assigned a staff person. They've rejigged their staffing, so we'll have someone joining us with that. So
Oh, good. Yeah.
we've been looking at a couple of different places that have something like that, and we're coming up with something that might work for Lunenburg County. So I
And it
think we're
won't just
close.
have to have a cutout around the town of Lunenburg the way our town appears on NS Power Maps.
Aaron,
This is a
on
community.
that point about the communications plan,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some other examples in the deck about funding that hasn't shown up yet, and I'm starting to be a little worried that it might not show up anytime soon.
The meeting on Tuesday will be really focused on that, and tomorrow I'll
Okay.
be sending out your package about it. So
Because
Yeah.
we've got a big piece of the funding for the communications contract funded with capital projects that we don't have funded.
Yeah.
So if the funding doesn't show up, there's, I think, some close to $40,000 expense hole that we would have to fill if I go by memory here. So I mean, we somehow will have to make accommodation somewhere else if the world doesn't turn the way we wanted it to.
Does our contract provide for that condition, CIO?
not in exactly those terms, but like I said, we've got this is
got
an item on
time,
the agenda
right?
on Tuesday, so we can kind of get into my thoughts about that in more depth.
Okay.
It's just we may have to cut here to fund that, but
Yeah.
we're kind of probably locked into the plan.
There's a little shifting around that we may have to do, but I
Yeah.
think we should save it.
You think meeting on the 29th, we might touch on that.
That's it's on the
Okay,
agenda.
fair enough.
And I know you guys don't have it yet. You'll have it.
No, it's okay.
I think my concern is that council needs to be aware of what's being proposed on the website before the contractor does hours of work developing the website.
Yep.
All right, so that we don't walk in the door and look up and say, no, and there it is. Right? And council would say, yes, no, whatever. Okay. So on the capital meeting we're going to have next week, Mr. CAO, that will be one of the topics, the communications plan.
Yeah, well, to Joe's point about how the communications contract relates to the
Like
different
we
capital
did,
projects. Yeah.
I just had a question. You referred to CED, Community Economic Development. Is that?
That's,
Economic Development Committee,
I
EDC.
think I meant to say
Oh,
EDC,
oh,
and
oh,
I just
okay.
got the
Sorry.
acronym.
So that's the town committee.
Yes.
And then when will this survey go out to committees?
The website survey?
About the website.
It has. It's on the AFC agenda.
You said on it? Oh, okay.
it's
Kelly
just going
had
out to committees now.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
It
Oh,
started
Police
this week.
Advisory Board was the first one to get it at 6 o'clock tonight.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
it's just started.
Not far
It's
behind.
on the agenda.
So they're,
Yeah.
I haven't-
Okay. Let me see, where's my finger at? Any other questions for the report for the CAO? Okay, let's move on. Solid waste management bylaw. This is the meeting we had prior to the council meeting.
So, Your Worship, a public hearing to receive written and verbal comments from the public on the proposed amended Town of Mahone Bay Solid Waste Management Bylaw was held on Thursday, October 24th, 2019 at 7 p.m. The hearing was duly advertised in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. No comments were received at the public hearing or prior to. The amended Town of Mahone Bay Solid Waste Management Bylaw passed first reading on September 26, 2019, and is now before council for consideration of second reading and adoption.
Okay,
Well said.
okay. We do have a proposed motion
With an
Accept.
amendment,
in the recommendation.
Yeah, so in the
second reading.
Yeah,
The second reading is
basically,
first.
yeah.
Mayor, I'd move that council provide the second reading of the amended Town of Mahone Bay Solid Waste Management Bylaw, number 46, as presented.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Our
Solid
garbage
waste.
gets picked up next week. Special meetings policy.
So it's a bit of a misnomer, but that is what we were asked to report on. In fact, what we're recommending is just a small tweak to the committee's policy.
Yeah.
But we did want to address the idea that we do have a couple of committees where the terms of reference actually specify that they're to meet once a month. And we certainly don't want to burn out the committee members, but there are requests for special meetings, so this is intended to provide some direction around the handling of those requests.
Councillor
I
Kerr.
so moved that council adopt the amended committee's policy as presented.
We actually, by policy, we need 7 days' notice, so that would be for the November 12th meeting, so this would
We'll
be.
table that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the support.
Yeah, it's
Notice of motion?
It's a little unusual. We've had 2 instances in the last 4 months where the HAC has been required to provide, homeowners with some dispensation. These are, by happenstance, some of the community's heritage designated buildings, and they wanted to make some alterations to the exterior, and of course they have to run through the process. So I think the committee and Councilor Carver sure would agree. We're trying to promote the program, eliminate the barriers and any reason why a homeowner may not want to participate in the heritage designated program, but occasionally they want to make some changes and alterations, and so we're trying to accommodate those things. And we have had a few special meetings on the fly. I think actually we ran into it with the museum last week or 2 weeks ago, which was a little bit of drama, but it was resolved in due course.
But that's a good point, is that we
policy will be
started
help-
this when
Yeah.
it was brought up by PAC, and,
Right.
and that was before these issues, and now we've seen it apply to HAC.
This policy would be very helpful.
And this limits a special meeting not less than 10 days before the next meeting, and on the other end as well. 10 days since the last regular meeting.
You may break some hearts along the way, but on the other hand, you do have something that you can speak to.
And
That
no one
gives
will
you-
ever have to wait more than approximately 10 days for
That's
it.
right.
You know, it's
I
not
mean,
bad.
I mean, the museum situation was unusual, and the fact that they had the Army Chief Corps of Engineers there ready to rip into the back building down with no permits or
The Army
HAC
doesn't,
approval.
the Army doesn't
or-
typically get permits,
No.
so they were probably
So that was a once in a decade situation, I'm sure.
But those things are externally driven.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just trying to keep the trains running on time, but it come up.
You and Mr.
But as it
Mussolini.
was, it didn't need,
No.
Heritage Advisory Committee involvement.
No.
So it was deemed
But
to
if
be
it
on the back
had,
of it,
we
yeah.
would have had to,
Hmm.
have a
And-
special
and-
meeting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But to Dylan's point earlier about the website review, if we look at our website update as a service delivery option, I'm thinking of one instance in particular that it would have been really helpful if that information had been there, and that's something that the HIC can come forward and say, hey, it would be really helpful if there were information there for people that have municipal properties. What does that mean? You know, how do I, what do I have to do?
I have a
that kind of-
municipal property and I want to renovate what, or
Yeah.
replurge for
Yeah.
what do I do?
Exactly. So those are the kind of
We
things
have
that
to
we're
know
hoping will
a
come
new
forward.
fact sheet.
Mm.
So when you're at your HAC meetings, they're
When you
filling in
get that survey.
yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Accidentally skipped to the expense policy. Do you have an item about the pay cap board?
You what?
Oh, on the screen I opened the expense policy, but the actual next item is the pay cap board. It just doesn't have it.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor.
No, it's just
No,
a
no,
notice
we
for
should
notice.
just-
Oh,
Yeah.
notice the motion for the next meeting.
Notice
Okay. All right. Temporary vending. Is it? No, expense
No.
policy
Town-
for
Town
children.
Town
Mm.
Town representative on Bay Cap.
Okay, but
You're doing the
that's
same
fine.
thing I did and looking for the blue.
I shouldn't be looking, I can't see that far away anyway, so. Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation. CAO and I had a discussion today. He is not aware of anyone who has stepped up and said they'd be interested to work with that group.
I've been thinking about that, your workshop, and as an interim measure, I will attend a future meeting or two.
Okay,
I wasn't at the last session. Was this an item on the last?
At the last
Council.
meeting, Carl let everyone know that he was stepping down.
Okay.
yeah.
So that's why we were asked to consider.
And I'm sorry everyone's already spoken about it, but Carl, could you tell me the date that is? The meeting is normally?
They fluctuate, but usually it's third Thursdays of the month.
Okay.
But sometimes in summertime, there's no meetings. The staff are all out on field work and that projects. And sometimes there's no need to have a meeting. It's not bonded that you're there every Thursday.
I'm, as everyone around the table is, both highly supportive and available. Well, not that everybody's available. Everyone's highly supportive. I would make myself available for that and would put my name forward.
That's fine with me.
No objections.
Is it evening or daytime meetings?
So we should do a motion.
Are the
to
meetings
appoint
evening or
Pauline, I guess.
daytime?
There are luncheon meetings. We'll have light lunch. It's 5:30. Meeting starts at 6.
Okay,
So no one.
okay. Would entertain a motion to appoint Councillor O'Neill to the,
So moved, Your Worship.
I'll second that.
moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, let's go to expense policy. I would not say childcare. I think it's an issue of care for members of the family. There was some documentation that came out of the FCM workshop in Quebec City back in the spring that talked about the need to increase the representation of certain groups, to increase the gender balance, the ethnic balance, whatever, on councils. And I would extend that to council committees. One can appreciate that counselors themselves, and I'm one of them, receives an honorarium from the town, which is intended to offset expenses, in part expenses that we incur as a result of doing that job. But people who participate in committees don't have that opportunity. And with an election coming in 2020, I would like to think that one of the things we can talk about, or that we can make clear, not only is there the honorarium for councillors, but that we also have an opportunity for people who are standing up as committee members who incur expenses in childcare, elder care, partner care, whatever the case may be, that the town would provide some remuneration relief for that requirement. There are a couple of councils in the province, most notably is over in Kings County, that have a policy in place that provides for not only home care expenses, but also provides for leaves of absence with pay for councillors, either in maternity or paternity scenarios. And I think it's something going forward that's going to be important. I think it's important if we're going to garner the support of all of our population in the town. And I am asking council for a motion to direct staff to look at what's out there, what the norm is, and see if there's some action we can undertake to close that gap.
So
Moved
No, second.
and seconded, please.
Are we ready for discussion?
Yep.
In your preamble, you used the word honorarium. Are you referring to?
We get an honorarium.
That's an honorarium. That's essentially money that we're paid to do this job as an elected official. Okay, so you're not, are you suggesting that committee members have an honorarium, or that they
No.
they have expenses?
So if a committee member, if a person is participating on a committee and is coming to a committee meeting
Mhm.
on a Thursday night, and they have a situation at home that would require elder care
Mhm.
or child care, right? Then there would be some financial contribution, i.e. we would pay X amount of money per hour to provide
Okay.
for that.
So the honorarium doesn't have anything to do with expenses. The honorarium is separate from
A
expenses.
portion of the honorarium used to be tax-free
That's
in
correct,
recognition of expenses that councillors incurred.
Yes.
But of course, that's gone now.
Yes, and when this issue about family care costs came up earlier in a previous council, that point was made that there would be no effort to provide costs towards that kind of care because our current honorariums have that 1/3 tax-free. So because we know that's gone,
Mhm.
it creates a situation where that makes more sense.
Okay.
Although,
So you're saying,
if I, as an elected official, if I had family care responsive costs to come to meetings, would I be as eligible? Yes, okay. Thank you. I've got an answer to my question.
what's the answer?
No, I got my, that's what it is.
Okay.
Mayor, just to clarify, so the motion that we're voting on would have staff evaluate kind of national norms and
Information gathering,
Information.
provincial norms.
Information gap, yeah.
Fair
Doesn't
Yeah,
even
we don't
have
have
to
to
be
go
national.
outside the
No,
province.
just go.
Fair
provincial.
enough,
Yeah.
and within the
Yeah.
province.
Like in Kings County, they do have it, but also in Kings County, they will not pay, they do not pay any other family member or permanent resident in the same household that the individual resides. okay?
Put it all,
They don't give them, I think it's $10 an hour that they get. They get paid by check, and their SIN number is captured by the town, and it is reported. And I'm given to understand that Kings County has never paid
Yeah.
1 hour of service.
If you needed to, you could.
But the policy's there,
Right.
right, if you need it. And I think we've got blinders on if we don't realize that there are people, we may have the greatest solution ever to our next problem, but they can't make it to the meeting because they have a partner who is dealing with Alzheimer's and needs somebody with them, right? And I think if staff can gather that information, we can make an informed decision rather than just ignoring it. Councillor Bain.
In the report, I think they should also include all of the municipalities that don't have this form of remuneration.
Well, they do or
So
they
that
don't.
we can
It
make
can
an
be both.
objective.
All we'll be able to do, as we've done in the past, is which ones have responded or that we're able to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as long as it's inclusive, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who's weighing in. And there's some discussion going on now because, as you said, the context of the next election is making people more conscious of, is this a barrier?
Yeah.
So,
98 women were elected federally.
But this analysis
Tuesday.
is boxed within the category of eligible expense versus honorarium.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm
Yes.
looking at it as an expense,
Expense.
policy.
It is. It is an
Expense
expense
policy.
policy.
Fair enough.
so
Yes.
it's not going to get into your honorarium.
Well,
Part of the discussion or part of the review would be the other policies that are out there. What's the rationale behind those policies? Why do those municipalities see it as being necessary? I'm not sure how the public would react to it. Here in Mahone Bay, I'm sure there will be people who say nay, nay, nay. Right? But I
But then you point out that our one provincial member has far more cost than the entire council, so
well, yeah, there's
really
that,
not bad. I mean, people get a pretty good deal here, I think.
Well, yeah, they do. I don't think that enters. That's not part of the discussion.
That's inclusiveness.
You know? Yeah.
Ready to vote?
Yep.
Yes, I am. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Now we will do the temporary vending bylaw. You all received a copy of the policy, I think, at the last council meeting. There was discussion around the notion of temporary vending. There has been some, I would call them informal discussions with the chamber over the last 2 or 3 years around temporary vending, and the mood seems to have shifted from one chamber president to the other around the notion of temporary vending. I know that some of the councillors have expressed concerns to me about temporary vending in Mahone Bay. And given that people who plan to be in temporary vending business in our town next year, beginning the long weekend in May, are going to soon make decisions around investments, it's fair, it's only fair if we look at that. If we're going to make changes, then let's make them now, and they can decide what to do going forward and not get blindsided by a new bylaw the 1st of May.
So the timing of this is such, and I had said, because the mayor had asked me by email, but I'll just add that the timing of this is such that, as you note on the council report, Maureen is working on a draft of a temporary vending bylaw to come on the 28th of November. Right now, that would at a minimum address some issues that staff have identified in terms of removing and streamlining the vending from the separate street activity festival type application. So we have some notes at the staff level about areas where the bylaw could be improved. But in order to get council's feedback so that we know that when we're working on the draft, we were hoping to bring stuff up now. And I'm going to add that we have a session set up with the chamber in 2 weeks' time for them to do similar and just give us some feedback It's not going automatically into the bylaw. It'll go in the report that goes to council on 28th. But so this is an opportunity. That's an opportunity. And then we also wanted to know from you, do we need additional public input on this? We did do a survey back in the spring. It was fairly brief, but it did give us a little bit of insight. So questions for you is, what do you actually want to see in the bylaw, if anything? And then do you think we need additional public input between now and later November?
I'll throw a few things on the table for discussion. Like, I think the title of the bylaw does say a lot, and it says temporary. So the situations where people avail themselves of the temporary vending bylaw, fair enough, as long as the bylaw allows us to really, really denote what temporary means.
Mhm.
Temporary does not mean permanent. Temporary means temporary. So if the bylaw, and I think we all know what we're talking about. So I think if we can put some color around temporary, that might go a long way. The other issue would be around duration and
Of a stay in
of
one location.
a limit of a particular stay. And I think being a reasonable person, you'd say that term or duration could be pretty significant, but it can't be forever, and it needs to be periodic. There needs to be a quote unquote cooling off period and now again, I think the bylaw and this council is reasonable, and we know that it might make sense for people to be in a particular location for many, many days in a row, and that may be totally appropriate. But there may come a time when the bylaw may be required to say, okay, after 90 days in one location, when never moving once, as long as you paid your bills, fair enough. But day 92, you need a cooling off period.
That's the middle of June till the middle of September, though.
So I mean,
Anyway.
I think as the conversation evolves and as the staff looks at it, and again, I think everybody, people are reasonable, and I think a reasonable accommodations will come out of that. But I think we just want to ensure that extreme use of the temporary vending bylaw gets curtailed to some degree.
Okay.
May I ask a question on that, just as we're going through this? When we talk about a stay of a certain period and then a cooling off period,
Right.
what is the appetite for, like Nellie's, for instance, in Lunenburg? It's usually over by the foundry. I don't know if it's there all summer or just when I see it. Is there an appetite to say, okay, something sets up for a whole season?
Well, I was
Or-
going to ask the same question from the angle of, do you see a distinction maybe between that as a commercially zoned property with an existing use of commercial, so that perhaps we would say that the temporary quality is even more temporary in areas that are not already zoned commercial? So that might be a way to
distinction.
make a distinction, because if you have a commercial property, it's, what's the difference between that and a building in some ways? But if you've put it where you otherwise aren't allowed to, then the temporary nature really kicks in. But that's just a thought as to how we could make a distinction.
And if you have that period in there, if it's temporary, so I think that facility or whatever it has to be gone for the rest of the time. You can't just stay there and then only be open on a temporary basis. I think it has to be.
Yeah, we'd have to be clear that what constitutes, when you're closed down, you're not staying on the premises,
Exactly.
which it is very clear in the rules that what they get from the province, that as soon as they're closed, they cease to be treated as a mobile eating establishment. So that right away, that then makes them either a derelict vehicle or a
Right.
building.
Well, I think you're probably on the right track with that. There's probably language that you could avail yourself of under a derelict. We wouldn't let someone park in front of the bank for 4 months in a row.
Yeah.
Or really anywhere for 4 months in a row. So I have every faith that we'll have a better bylaw in a couple months, and it will continue to evolve as
And maybe there is a difference with commercial properties as opposed to, is there any allowability in a residential neighborhood? Are there different zones where different rules can apply for temporary vending with a different pricing structure for fees?
Like right now, you can have a chip wagon in your laneway. how long would you be allowed to have a chip wagon selling in your laneway? It's a residential neighborhood. You'd think not very
Only
long.
long enough for your dad to back his truck up.
Really? I could have
There's
a
nothing
chip
in the
wagon?
bylaw that
Yeah.
says you can't.
Ooh.
If you apply for
Scary.
a temporary
If you get a permit, yeah.
Okay.
If you,
Temporary
On my
permit.
property.
but you'd think then that it would be very limited in a residential area.
And does temporary mean mobile?
Well, I think temporary means it has to be mobile.
Just
Well, that issue
Mm.
comes up more depending on the zone. If a zone prohibits anything but mobile, then you're really into that. You know,
Right.
a lemonade stand has been treated as a temporary vending by the town in the past, so that would be an example where it's not a mobile eating establishment that the province has permitted.
Yeah.
I
Just to
don't think a
clarify,
lemonade
there's-
stand. I think a lemonade stand should be exempt. To be honest, I think we should figure out some way to be able to exempt some kids from.
We just
selling.
have a very unique situation on zoning in areas where we have restrictions. I mean, I think if temporary, if I think we just have a very specific example of a situation that needs to be addressed.
And let's not forget the notion of the festival piece. Because we do have provisions for temporary vendors who are aligned to a particular festival
Sure.
and are operating under the umbrella of that festival's permit. Councillor O'Neill.
My thoughts are sort of connecting a number of those thoughts, and my concern was that any bylaw would at least consider a full exclusion zone. Like, do we have zones that are fully excluded from temporary vending permits, full stop, with the exception of festivals, with the sole exception of festivals? And that was the only,
So you're talking about areas identified where no temporary vending is allowed.
is ever allowed with the
Except
exception of
on
a
a
festival. I'm not saying that that's what I'm suggesting, but I think that that would be worth pursuing.
Yeah, and I mean, right now we don't because we have no link to zoning. But if we start looking at the zoning, it might beg some question around a residential zone. Now, in a residential zone in Mahone Bay, you are allowed to have a home-based business which can sell pretty much the same stuff that you could sell. So we'd have to consider if we're not disallowing that, and there are some communities where home-based businesses are not allowed at all in like an R2 zone, for example. But that would presumably there'd be a little bit of fair play to suggest that if you opened your own house as a business, it wouldn't really be that different in terms of traffic and impacts on the neighborhood from having a mobile there. But I think that's a good point.
I think the spirit of council and the conversations we've had so far have been, we're not trying to preclude anybody from doing anything that would be beneficial to the community or their own particular pocketbook. Go forth and multiply, let capitalism reign. This is a specific issue around trying as a council to be cognizant of the laws of unintended consequences, knowing that if we don't do something, something could show up next year or the year after that or 5 years down the road that we won't be able to stop because we've been so charitable in turning a blind eye now. And I think we're on the right track.
Councillor Carver.
I'm gonna be devil's advocate now.
No.
During some controversy, approximately a decade ago, maybe, about temporary vendors, one part of the dynamic was to try and control. Another part of it, the dynamic was the bigger. It's not a pie that with a limit. There's room for everybody, and the more that's going on, the more that is going to be going on, it creates a better dynamic. So that was being expressed just by people in the community. And a more recent example is during one of the workshops that I've gone to recently, where the leader, the resource person, an eminently recognized international expert in placemaking, happened to have dinner at Rebecca's, and after his dinner at Rebecca's went across the road for ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
And so during the placemaking workshop, he talked about this wonderful thing. This is a perfect example of placemaking, of something that happens in the community, and it creates color, it creates activity, it creates more buzz, more people come and do interesting things. Well, you can just imagine. But it's another perspective. It's another perspective to think about.
And I wouldn't say
Formula.
actually necessarily any contradiction to the idea of, capitalism and entrepreneurs will flourish. We just have to manage that activity.
I just wanted to pick up on that because I'm also aware of Yarmouth, for example, has removed the per day temporary vending. So on food trucks, for example, Yarmouth's idea is that the more the better. They bring in all kinds of different, it's very dynamic. It's different. It changes up. It's a reason to visit Yarmouth, and it's considered by in the documentation that I've read about Yarmouth. It's considered really, they didn't call it placemaking, but really about how they see their community and how they're building their community. So I would really like ours to. And when I'm listening to Councillor Carver talk about that, I think about when I first joined council and I was talking to some of the young food vendors in town, one of whom has folded up shop. So Lobster Joe's has folded up, and I hope she won't mind me using her as an example, but expressing her frustration and the cost of a food vending license and the difficulties of obtaining one. And I guess when I was talking to some of the younger food vendors who this is really their buy into capitalism a little bit, like I was at an event where the one where the $1,000 goes to the person with the best idea, the Awesome Foundation, and there were a couple of guys out of university. They just finished a business degree and they were trying to get $1,000 to start their world's best fish and chips truck. And I think sometimes this is it's a way for younger people who are starting businesses to get that early. So I just would like, in the spirit of whatever it is you're putting together, I would just like to, to keep the door open for that kind of retail and energy in the town.
And it's all about incentivizing the kind of behavior that you want. I mean, that's what the fee structure is for. So Yarmouth went through the process to figure out what behavior they wanted, and then they came up with a change. In Shelburne, you buy a once annual permit for $200, so it's very similar because the incentive is to come back then as much as possible.
Going to Councillor Carver's comment about 10 years ago, at one point the Chamber of Commerce was on record with council as being opposed to food trucks because they were concerned that the food truck was going to cut into their business. And then a different mindset came to the chamber, and that president's notion was, if I've got 5 food trucks in town, people may come in because of that. They can't all eat at the same food truck, so there'll be some spin-off to the restaurant. Not everybody likes food trucks. And I think that's why this discussion engaging with the chamber is so important. Right? Because I think we need their buy-in with this, because it's their established bricks and mortars businesses that will be impacted, maybe positive, maybe negative. What do you think, right?
Well, the argument was, I know that Councillor Noss was there and yourself, was that they don't pay taxes, so therefore they have to pay a hefty fee.
You pay the fee through the
And
tax.
the other people are paying taxes, and that was one of the arguments
Yep.
for that. I think in talking about what Councillor Feeney is saying, I think we do have to be fairly cautious that we don't end up with kind of precedent setting and we have these things sitting on our waterfronts and this sort of thing.
Yep.
And so, not speaking against it, but being very cautious as to, we don't let fast food come in. Tim's is the only one, so I think we have to be cognizant of what can or cannot take place.
And I think that's why the work that staff is going to do on this is going to be so important.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and I find this is a point I bring up a lot when I speak with the business community, is we tend to think about food trucks when we think about temporary vending for a lot of good reasons, but it is other things as well. That is people who sell earrings, that is, somebody with a guitar.
Cases and shoes.
Cell phone cases, a guitar on the side of the road. There's a lot of things that come into this, and we think about food trucks a lot. I think partially because of that history with the
Most
business
visible,
community.
yeah.
They're most visible. We all eat there, but it does encompass a lot more than that as well. So we have
Does
to
it-
look into all of it.
Does the truck that sells safety shoes, do they get a temporary permit? You see them parked at the one of the church parking lots. Is it SECD?
They're just in town, your worship, they go like to reinforced plastics,
Yes.
Abco, Lunenburg.
So they're
Factory
not
Lunenburg.
selling to the
No,
public
no,
on the street
no,
side?
They're
Okay.
strictly those.
Okay.
Do we,
Put that away.
is there a knife sharpener who goes around town? I remember when I was little, there was a knife sharpener, just kind of.
Is that the,
We have one.
Hubbard's Market's got one.
yeah, it's one in
Would
Lunenburg
that-
Market every Thursday.
Would that need a
So, so one thing I was going to mention, the most list of examples is services takes that even further. Services
Okay.
is in the definition.
okay.
A lot of the time, the sale of services is going to escape our notice.
Right.
But theoretically, setting up to sell services.
Roadside legal advice. You got
Everything from palm readings to legal advice.
Goes to Hubbard's.
Well, I think we'll let staff
That's
work
good.
with that, your worship.
Yes, Michelle.
Thank you.
I love it.
Because you've already got
Yeah, I've
that.
got notes.
Okay, good. All right. Let's go to Watershed Advisory Committee, the draft minutes.
Yes, your worship, we had a
Deputy Mayor.
meeting October 7th. Slow start, but we gotta waiting for some people we thought were coming, they weren't invited, so.
Fix that.
We got that fixed for next meeting, but one item was brought up to our attention, the east side of the lake, Martin's Riverside, made it easier for you, is not, the municipality has no zoning whatsoever in the area. It's just basically a free-for-all, other than the water regulations that's set up by the province. So we discussed that, and we feel it's time that the staff, may contact MODL planners and just see what they can get going and give us some more protection in the area instead of something being built and or somebody applies for a permit and then we're in a mess. So that was basically the intent of the
Yeah, part of
discussion.
the current problem is that even though the protection area applies, if you go into MODL's planning to get a permit for something,
Yeah.
they're not telling you that you're in a provincial watershed area because it's not part of their planning guidelines. So a big reason to build it in is that would be part of their process, so homeowners are more aware if you're buying a property. And also to help us with this, we're not just asking, the province has told them they have to have mandatory planning in all watershed areas, I think by 2023. So we're just trying to make sure that we're on the list.
So I would recommend, your worship, that that council direct staff to contact MODL Planning Department to initiate discussions, re-mandate land use planning in the watershed area.
Seconded by Councillor Bain.
We should get
You
something
you
by
look
next meeting.
perplexed,
'cause it's 6
No,
months
I-
from now.
Yeah.
My brain caught up. It's
Okay, good. All in favor? Good motion.
I have a question on that committee though. There used to be a citizen representative on that committee, at least one. from
We'd
the
love to
town.
have one.
Nobody applied.
Oh, so that nobody applied.
No.
It has to be a resident of the watershed area.
Yeah, landowner of the
Oh,
watershed
so-
Oh, no,
area.
but,
Been struggling with getting somebody.
but there used to be a resident of the town on the, on the.
No.
It's not in our terms of reference.
No, just landowners.
Varian Hasem was on it, the one.
It's not that we couldn't, but in our terms of reference that
That's
we've
right,
got,
too.
it
He was,
doesn't
yeah.
include that.
We did advertise for 2 landowners, but nobody
And
stepped
we had a
up.
good conversation with our municipal colleagues about how
Yes.
do we get someone, so we're gonna keep trying.
Yeah, we have a lot, they gave us lots of contacts,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Penny, you want to do the
October
honors?
9th.
Certainly. We continued to work on documents, fine tuning, and we were delighted to have an application from the St. James Church Council to register the rectory, which is something that we asked them about several years ago. In fact, several of us from the committee and then Mayor Joe Feeney did a traveling roadshow to meet with the church council and talk about registration and what it means and what the issues are and answering their questions, and a couple of registered property owners were there and talking about their experience. So they've come back and said that they're willing to register their property, so we're really pleased about that. So we actually began the process of establishing qualifications and so on. So it'll be coming back to council at some point.
Any questions? Don't forget tomorrow at 11:30 for the unveiling of the plaque at the Saturday on the Biscuit Eater,
And 10 o'clock.
and Deborah Trask's presentation at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yeah, and it'll be really interesting to talk about the evolution of the town and the architecture and the growth of the town. And Deborah is an amazing resource that we're very privileged to have working with us at the committee and with the town. As I said earlier, she is the curator emeritus of the Nova Scotia Museum, so she spent her whole work life in the Nova Scotia Museum. And is the author of several books and is considered to be an expert in graveyards, gravestones. So that'll be a very interesting talk, and then there'll be some refreshments, and then the people will move around the corner to the Biscuit Eater for the unveiling.
Yep. Very good. And just before we leave that, I saw a draft of the book that staff have been working on. I saw there's only a few pages of the first part of the book, and it is really impressive. I think it's going to be a fabulous finished product, and I think we're going to have a sellout item on our hands. It really is being expertly crafted.
This is the book initiated by Bob Sayer.
Yes.
Yes, he was a big
Yes.
contributor.
Yeah, he was.
And the
This was his
staff
idea.
and staff really helped bring the magic to it as well.
And if you could sneak into the house and peek into Kelly Redden's brain while she sleeps, I'm sure she's seeing the pages and the photos go
He's
by.
learned a lot of history.
While you're on that subject, Your Worship, how many of the books are we publishing, and are you taking advanced orders?
I think, the 500, it'll sell for something like $30. They're still negotiating around what a store owner would pay for it, because they have to make a few bucks, but the town will end up breaking even or making a few bucks on it. But yeah, if you're, I'm thinking of folks that used to live in town, it might be a nice Christmas gift for them.
I think we will take priority. I think the plan is right now we're just confirming some of the price stuff, and then what we'll probably do is start advertising it about 2 weeks before the intended launch of Father Christmas.
It's
So
gotta be a sold item, so
I
just
think
think,
it
the person
is.
wants to get in on it.
I think it is. It'll be the 20th reprinting or something. Anyway,
Bob will be happy with that.
you will be suitably impressed when you see it.
And I will add too, it's not just unique from a historical and town perspective, but as a corporate document about the town as a corporation and from an asset management perspective, I'm going to be sharing this book at conferences. It is actually very interesting.
Now that you mention that, but it might be something where we keep some copies on the shelf, and when a notable personage, right, comes into contact with the town, that can be a gift, right? Anyway, no new business?
We're skipping
I
some.
want to speak to the.
Economic development. Oh yeah, quorum was not
Well,
met.
it's self-explanatory, we didn't have a meeting because there wasn't a quorum, but I did send out a memo
Saw that.
to all the members, and I think it was copied to some people here, I don't think I copied it to all the council, just stressing the fact that it doesn't just apply to the Economic Development Committee, but if committee members cannot attend, it would be appreciated if they could send their regrets. In our case, we had one member show up, one person sent regrets, but staff were here, you were on Skype, and that took a fair bit of preparation. So I think maybe if other committees run into this, it's worth mentioning the fact that there is a big staff effort goes into this. It's just not a matter of the chair showing up and conducting a meeting.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I sent a little note after a recent age-friendly community committee where we actually did end up
We
having,
did, but it was close.
having a quorum, but some people hadn't turned up and they hadn't sent regrets, and I did send a little, it was a fairly polite note afterwards, reminding people so they,
You do have to let people know it's not acceptable, or they'll
Yeah.
think that that's how they
Yeah.
do it.
And for those of you that are, well, counselors certainly, that have got the Microsoft Teams option on your laptops, much better video connectability than with Skype. I was on from Victoria a couple times and it's just sharp, crisp, clear, it doesn't fall in and out, and it's a good system that they've got.
And they are actually phasing out Skype in favor of that now.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think Microsoft
Yeah,
bought
they bought
Skype,
Skype.
and this is what it's become.
I just wanna, add to that if we are notified that we don't have a quorum, there's nothing wrong with not having a committee meeting. I mean,
Right,
it can be
right.
rescheduled,
yeah.
so I mean, that's the one thing too, that's very.
You can have a special one now.
Yeah, pick a date.
You're right, John. I should clarify. What I said was unacceptable was the lack of letting us know. People have things come up in their lives, and obviously
Yes,
they're
absolutely.
volunteers.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Enough said.
No new business. Oh, Colleen O'Neill, new business.
For those who would like to attend this lunch but are not able to attend the speakers during our following the NSFM, Mayor Davies and John Weber will be coming to the Mahone Day Center on Friday, November the 8th, and will be speaking from 7 until 9 p.m.
That same night.
And the topic is our coasts, economy, climate, the fight against offshore drilling here and abroad.
Yeah, that is the same night, right?
Is it on Friday night?
It's the same night.
I was under the impression it was Wednesday, but that's
It's
even
Friday.
better if it's Friday. No, and Micah's on Friday. The Micah
Yeah,
is
Mike is
Friday.
Friday. Mike is Friday night too.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to send that to
We let a crossover between
That's
you
that and
and
that
you can
group.
distribute
I
it.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Should get them to come to the Micah dinner
Yeah,
and speak.
they'll all be
Yeah.
there, yeah.
exactly.
Okay,
So we do have a closed session.
yes, we are gonna have a closed session, NGA section 22(2)A, the acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property immediately following this meeting. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
No,
Oh,
just
no,
go
go
in
in camera.
Oh, I think, oh
Yeah,
no, that's
no,
right, we
no,
don't
no.
adjourn this one
Yeah, we
first.
go in camera.
Okay, motion to go in
So
camera.
moved, Your Worship.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? We're in camera.